Hello, welcome to Fiberchats. My name is Irina. I'm the host of Fiberchats. Love having you here. If you're new to my channel, please take a look around. Consider subscribing, liking these videos. Put in the comments what you like about the videos or who you would like to see on Fiberchats in the future. My guest today is Erin Clayton from Erineen Designs. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
I love having you here. So let's start with how you started to knit. You don't have the usual story where the grandma taught you when you were 5. You didn't knit as a child, right?
No, I didn't. I learned to crochet when I was like 8 years old, but knitting, I did have a grandmother who tried to teach me and I just didn't seem to get it. But then about 6 years ago, my daughter was taking a knitting class at a local yarn store. And at the end, I said to the owner, I was like, you should probably show me how to do this so that I can help her. And then I never stopped. My daughter doesn't knit so much anymore, but I, just couldn't stop.
So do you remember your very first project, what you made?
Oh, I absolutely do. I started by making a Tin Can Knits barley hat, and I absolutely loved it. It was a great hat. And I have to say that at the beginning, I had a hard time telling my knits from my purls, which I think a lot of us do. So I still have that project. And there's one spot where I was supposed to purl and I knit, and I could see it now, but it's such a great story to be able to tell. So I keep that hat.
I love that because it's like I was actually talking to somebody and they were like, "Oh, this is my very first project." And I love that because it's like it's sort of on one hand, it's impressive that you're able to make a hat as your first project, right? But on the other hand, like you can see all the mistakes and all the imperfections because it's your first project. But it's
Yep.
sort of like this memory about it, how it's all started and how far you went.
Absolutely. I love that part of it. It's a rite of passage to have that first project that's not quite what you wanted, but it got you to where you are now.
Right. I mean, my first project was this pair of booties that I decided to make for my one of my best friends. She was pregnant with her fourth, and as she assured everybody at that point, her last child. And she said, this is my fourth kid. I never had a baby shower. And I was like, you know what? I'm organizing the baby shower and I have to make something for this baby with my hands. So I went on YouTube and I saw this pair of booties and I was like, I think I can do that. And he loved that. Like he was wearing it until he was basically like 2.5 or something. Because
That's
obviously,
fantastic.
like I didn't calculate the size very well. So he couldn't even like start wearing them until he was already like walking toddler.
But how fantastic that was your first project. A lot of people would be intimidated by it. I've never made booties, but they're beautiful and what a great story.
Right. And the kid loved that. So it was like, bonus on the kid.
Good.
So, okay, you started knitting, you made your first hat, you figure out you can knit and purl. How the heck do you go from that to your 30th design being published now?
Well, I am a designer. Like I feel like that's in my blood. I've been a graphic designer for 20 years. I, as well as knitting, I used to quilt, and I would, instead of following someone else's pattern, I would come up with my own ideas and I would design things. So designing just came naturally to me. So when it got to a certain point where I knew what I wanted, but I couldn't necessarily find it, I started to design it. And from there, I said, well, if I'm designing it, I might as well see if other people would like to knit it. And that's how I got started.
Well, was it like instant success? Like you posted your first design and you were like, here's the world, this is my first design. What did the world reply?
I had some sales, but just like anyone who starts out, they weren't that great. But over time, I learned more, and the people who were knitting my stuff were loving it. They were not only loving that I have a very clean aesthetic. I also, because of my graphic design, I really think a lot about readability of patterns, and it's something I'm very passionate about. So I take my experience in publications over the years and I translate that into my patterns. So I was finding that when people were knitting my patterns, they were saying, I love this, it's so easy to knit, and they were coming back. So but it happened over time.
Have you ever been frustrated with like the speed of how people learn about you, or how, like of the marketing basically side of that?
The marketing is a struggle, and I felt like I just learned along the way. I learned what worked and what didn't. And where I am now with my marketing is so much different from where I started. But I found that I would get to a certain point with something and feel comfortable, and then I would layer something else on. Now it gets to the point where I can do all the pieces I need to release my pattern in probably around 4 hours. Whereas before, and I have a checklist, but before it would take me time and I wouldn't know what I was supposed to do. So it's draining, but it's necessary, and having the checklist helps a lot.
Right. When you put the pattern together,
Yes.
what's the favorite part of that design process, and what's your least favorite part of the design process?
My favorite part, I'd say, is coming up with the actual design. It's having an idea in my head and then pulling out my books and finding the perfect thing to put it all together. Because I know I like certain shapes of shawls. I know I like certain weights of different things because I've been, doing this for a few years. And so then I know what I want it to look like in my head, and then being able to like mathematically find the perfect thing that's going to fit in there to make it a good experience for knitters. That is just absolutely such a joy. And my least favorite thing, I would say, I tend to put off writing the romance and taking the pictures. I will have my patterns done months in advance. Like I have things that I have complete except for the photos and the romance, and they will be sitting for 2 months. But then 3 days before, I'm rushing to get that final step. And like I know what I want to say in my head, but getting it out and then trying to figure out the perfect photo, that's the part. I don't necessarily dislike it, but I procrastinate it.
Are you like usually very organized
Yes.
about your patterns? Like,
Yes.
and
I
you,
love to organize. It's like it's in my blood.
and it's so you have a plan for like till the end of this year, till the middle of the next year. Like, how far
Yes,
are
I
you
have a plan until May of next year. I sit down and I make a rough plan in one sitting of my entire year. And so in my mind, my year goes from August through May. I tend not to release as much in June and July because I've been working with the Maine Yarn Cruise, doing a knit along for them over the last 3 years. And so my focus during the summer is on that. So I'll sit down and I'll be like, okay, I know that I want, say a worsted weight shawl with a lot of texture. And I know I want that, say, in March. So I'll like draw that in, and I'll start to layer in the things that I know that I want. And there's times where I actually have something that I say I accidentally designed because I had a full schedule, but I had a new idea. So I did it, but then it wouldn't fit. So the shawl that I just released last month or a couple weeks ago, I did that a year ago and I just had no room for it. So I kept pushing forward. So I was able to get it in. But yeah, I love to be organized and have a plan, and just know what I'm doing.
do you ever need other people's patterns?
I do occasionally, but it's usually something small because I can't commit with the schedule that I keep to knit something too big. So I absolutely adore hats. So I will knit hat after hat. And I don't know if it's because I did that a hat as my first project
Right.
or what, but it has these little sheep on it. I swear to you, I've probably knit 7 of them. They're a perfect palette cleanser. I can use up my scraps when I have a lot in either testing or I'll have 4 or 5 projects going in different places.
Right.
So sometimes I'm like, I just need something that I don't have to think about. So I'll go to this hat and I love it. So that's my go-to.
Is that one of the Shetland Wool Week fair acts?
No,
No.
no, I think it's it's her, actually her name is Sam Lamb, and it's I don't remember the name right now, but it has just these cute little sheep, and it seems like every time I get tired of one thing, I'm on to the next thing. So it just keeps my interest, and I'm usually done within 2 days with it. So I can move on to something that I need to do rather than I want to do.
Right. Does it ever frustrate you to the fact that there is these deadlines and like you might want to do something else, but you know that you have to do that just to keep on schedule?
No, actually, I like deadlines because I feel like they keep me on track. I feel like before I started to have a committed time to myself that I was going to bring something out, then it would kind of get pushed along, but by saying, okay, this is coming out at the beginning of October, I know, okay, I need to do this and this and this and this. And ultimately, I want to release this thing. So by having a solid plan and knowing these are the dates that I need to hit, it allows me to fit the other things I want to do in between. And I might say, okay, I might not want to do this part, but I'm going to do this part, and then I'm going to do something I want to do. But I find that not having a deadline or having too tight of a deadline will amp up my anxiety and then shut down my creativity. So by having the deadlines and having the plan, it allows me to just keep on track and keep anxiety at bay.
When you pick up the pattern that you're going to design,
Mhm.
what's the process? Like, do you have a pattern in mind and then you just do it? Or do you think like, okay, this pattern I did last month, taught this technique and this technique and this technique. Now I want to show this technique, or this is going to sell because it's this time of the year. And like, do you go by what's going to be in demand, or do you go what artistic idea popped into your head at the moment?
I go with mostly an artistic idea that pops into my head, but I try and I keep with, I call it on brand, where I want it to be an easy but engaging knit. So I know what I want it to look like in my head. I might have seen, there's times that I'll see something in nature that inspires me, either a texture or the way that the other, maybe a month ago, the way that the sun was coming through the curtains and the blinds, it made this cool shape. And I was like, oh, that makes me think that I want to do something with that. So I'll take a picture of it and then I'll come back to it. But once I have the idea, I need to make sure that it is easy to follow, that it is going to be like, if there are charts, I want to make sure that there's like the minimum amount of charts so that it's an easy experience. Because in my mind, like, life is stressful enough. I don't want your knitting to be. So I kind of bring all of those things together. But that said, if I find that a certain pattern is doing really well, I try and figure out what it is that made that such an enjoyable experience for people. And then I'll go back and I'll try and recreate the experience with something else.
So when you finish the design itself, do you test it? Do you send it to the tech editor? What's your process after the initial like pattern's been written down?
After I've written it and knitted it myself, and get all the information, I send it to a tech editor. And then once I get it back from them, then I go through test knitting. And once the test knitters are done, then I'll release it. But I usually have, like I said, I give myself buffer. That way, if something goes wrong, we still have time.
Right. And who is the ideal test knitter for you? Like, how do you pick them?
Well, at this point, I have a list of people who like have done test knitting for me in the past, and I'll send it out to them and see what they say. But I'm pretty easygoing when it comes to test knitting. I really just want to make sure that it works, and that and I know it works because I've knit it and the tech editor has gone through it. But I want to make sure that it's a good experience. I make sure that I put notes in there for, with lace, I'm a big believer in stitch markers, so I'll give you tips about stitch markers. If there's a way that you can modify it, I'll make sure to give tips about that. So what I'm really looking for is, did you enjoy this? That is my number one question to them. And I've not had anyone not enjoy it, so that's a good sign.
What about like, did people disappear from you, like on being test knitters, committing to test knit and then not finishing it on time? Or
Yeah, absolutely, that's happened. And I've decided to just let it go. If that's going to happen, they maybe have something going on in their lives, if they're busy. If they come back to me and they let me know that, oh my gosh, something happened, that's fine. I have so many other things going on in my life that I don't want to stress about that. I just let it go and I figure, okay, and I move on.
do you remember first time seeing somebody knitting your design?
Yes. Yes, that was crazy. I was actually out, and somebody had noticed what I was wearing and commented on it. And I said, oh, I designed this. It was the first main yarn cruise thing I had done. I said, it's the Philomena shawl. And she said, that's you. I'm knitting your shawl. And it was like, the hair on the back of your neck stands up and you're like, oh my gosh. So yeah, that was crazy.
So like over the last few years, right, when you published, 30 designs, it's a lot of patterns. Do you get like a bunch of fans that like always follow you, always knit all your patterns? Is there like some die hard
Yes,
out there?
I do. I have a few of those where they are just so excited to see something come out. They love the experience. I actually have a Patreon, and I have a few people in there who are like, we just want to tell you what we want to knit, and then you can design it, because we just really enjoy the way that you write it and the aesthetic. But yeah, I do definitely have a handful of super fans, and it makes my heart just like so big.
So like your daughter was the one who we blame your knitting career on now. It's all her fault.
Absolutely.
How does she look at you now that like you became this big designer? Like how does she perceive you? Does she brag about you to her friends?
Yeah, she's in ninth grade now. And when she was in middle school before the pandemic, she would wear one of my shawls that I had made. And it was a worsted weight, it was the Gowla shawl. It was a worsted weight triangle. And she would tie it around like a little sweater. And all of her teachers would comment on it. And she's like, oh, my mom designed this. It's called the Gowla shawl. You can find it here. She has a website, which is just fantastic. And it made me really happy. And then she's proud of the work that I've done, and the fact that I've just pushed through and, done what I wanted to. And she just thinks it's fantastic.
Do you ever design specifically for kids or like for teenagers?
I don't necessarily for kids. I did one pattern that was little boot cuffs for little kids. I did an adult version, and someone had suggested, well, what if you did one for kids? So I have that. But other than that, my hats, most of them can fit teens or adults. But I tend to design things that are very wearable for mostly adult women, because I like to show how I like to wear them. And I'm a bit of a minimalist, and I'm very intentional about things in my life. So if I'm going to create something, I want to be able to show people how wearable it is.
Is there a particular pattern that you like so proud of?
Yes, it's my fee shawl. And it has a mosaic border, and it has a textured body. And I definitely feel like I pushed myself on that, because I hadn't done any mosaic before that. I was a big fan of color work, but not mosaic. And just figuring out how to make it as easy to knit, but still have such a striking appearance, because that's very important to me, that it's got a clean look, but it's something that is timeless. But that someone goes, ooh, that's really pretty. But definitely the fee shawl, between the charts for it, because one of the things that's important to me is that when I do color work charts, I make sure that I do a light on dark and a dark on light, so that you don't have to switch it in your head. But I then did it for the mosaic. So I had this like big chart, because it's, you know, it's a border, and then I had to do it in both. So that like nearly broke me, but I'm so happy that I did it, and I'm very proud of it.
Do you have it next to you
I
somewhere?
do.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah. So it's got this really pretty just mosaic border, and then it's got this like broken waffle texture. I absolutely love it. So this is, and it's big, which I think makes it so wearable. But yeah, I love the fee shawl. And then I made a cowl out of it too. So that way, if someone was intimidated by this, because it's flat, they could do the cowl first, get used to the chart, and then move on to the fee shawl.
Right. So, I mean, but it's not Fair Isle, it's Mosaic, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So when you design, when you plan for the year,
Mhm.
plan certain amount of hats, certain amount of shawls, like how do you decide what exactly you're gonna design?
So I usually try and release, I call a big and then a small, so that I offset things, because in my mind, if you're working on a shawl, you don't have room to pick up another shawl, right? It's overwhelming. So I try and think about the people who are knitting what I'm putting out. And so if I do a shawl, then I'll do a hat or a cowl next. And then I'll do another bigger thing after that. So I find that there's certain times a year that I like to knit certain things. And so I make sure those release at that time of year. So for Christmas, I tend to think about giftable things. So I have smaller things, cowls, hats. I like to start out the fall and the spring with a shawl, like usually a worsted weight shawl in the fall, and then one after Christmas. And then when you're coming into spring and summer, I like to do some lighter shawls, like usually fingering weight. So what I do is the ones that I know solidly that I want to do, I layer those in first. And I treat my designs like a bento box, where I want to have balance. So I think about like, okay, I know I have this, like this fall, I'm going to be releasing my first garment, which is super exciting. So I knew that had to go in, and I knew that was going to take time to figure out. So just figuring out like how it all balances out.
Did it terrify you to do all the grading for the garment?
I actually worked with my tech editor to work on the grading, because I figured that was just one more thing I didn't have to think about right now. I could focus on the design and making it as easy as I could for the knitters, and then I could work with her in order to like make sure the grading was spot on. It's something I'd like to fit in later on, but right now I wanted to have a solid design that was easy to knit, and then work with her to make sure that the grading was just right.
Do you feel like you're learning something new yourself with every project that you design?
Absolutely. I really do. Because I'm not big on layering in new techniques. Some people are all about that. They want to teach something new to people. I want to give you something that is relaxing and engaging, because like I said, life in general just feels stressful, and I enjoy something that is engaging in my hands, and I know a lot of other people do too. So I will add in a technique if I feel like it's perfect for it, but I'm not looking to teach a whole bunch of new things. But I definitely do learn new things, and I'll be like, well, I know I want to do, this. How do I do that in the best way? So it's more about process for me, figuring out how to make it better.
Well, let's talk about that. So you're very organized, you are a minimalist. Looking back now at your first patterns, do you wish like you could rewrite them? Do you like, oh my God, like what was I thinking? I wish I knew then what I know now. Like, do you ever being overcritical of the things that you already created?
No, actually, because I think I've been a graphic designer and a designer in general for so long, I can't seem to design things that aren't clean lines. Like it just is who I am. So my first designs are as they're really the same, like on brand. And because of having the graphic design background, I think I wrote it well. So I know in other parts of my life I am critical, just like we all are, but I feel happy with my first designs. I think that they were good.
Do you have any of them to show us?
I absolutely do. I can show you my first design, which was called the Harlan shawl. And the funny thing is, I hadn't figured out my naming convention at this point. So this was named after a song that I liked, and I hadn't tied in my Irish heritage yet. But this is called the Harlan shawl. And so it's same thing. Like it's just written where there's one chart for the lace, and everything else is just written in a way that's easy to follow. And I did garter for the body, and then the lace is stockinette base so that it pops. But yeah, I love this just as much now as I did when it came out. And then
Let's talk
another one.
about the naming of the things that you do. So at some point you decided that you're gonna go by all these places where your mom used to live when she was in Ireland, right?
Yes. Yeah, I definitely, so the name Erineen Designs is when you add EEN to something in Gaelic, it actually means small. So when I was little, my mom would call me Erineen, and my brother's name is Sean, and she would call him Shawneen. So when I named my business, I named it Erineen Designs. Because I feel a very strong connection to my Irish heritage. My mom was born in Ireland, and she had 9 brothers and sisters. She lived on a farm, and she moved out to the US when she was 16. But we have always just been very tied to our heritage. So when it came to me naming things, naming is hard, coming up with a name that's right, but naming is important. Names are very important to me. And so I thought, what if I were to name it after places in Ireland that either she's been, I have a shawl that's named after the town, which is super tiny, that she grew up in. And I have, a whole bunch of patterns that are named after places nearby. But now, like, I'm kind of not necessarily running out of them, but like we're having to go further out. So I'm, naming it after areas around where she grew up. And I'm pulling out aspects of the area that inspire the actual designs.
Do you go there a lot? Like, I mean, not right
No,
now.
I haven't been in a long time. The last time I was there, I was 20 years old. So I really want to bring my daughter back there because she's named after my mom's sister, and they have not met yet. So I'd love to go there and take pictures in front of signs with the names. Like that's a huge, just something I really want to do.
Yeah, that would be like actually incredible to see all those shawls and knitted items next to the places where you named them after,
Absolutely.
right? So what's for the plans for the rest of this year?
Well, this is a shawl that's coming out later this year. This is called the Lettermore shawl, and it's a worsted weight with it's stockinette with some slip stitches and some texture, oversized, written in two sizes. So the one is oversized and the one is a little bit smaller. And I have some collaborations coming out. I have some shawls. I have the sweater. I've been working with some incredible companies. I'm really excited to be working with them. But a lot of it you will see is very on brand for me. It's very important that it's easy to knit, that it's wearable, that you're going to be able to wear it for years to come.
How do you decide who to collaborate with?
For me, color is very important. Color, and I'll know kind of the fabric, or like what I want the fabric of the finished piece to look like. So I will look around and see who I can find that is a company I want to work with and has the kind of color palette that I like, and then just is going to have the drape. My designs tend to look better in solids or tonals. So I tend to work with people who have things like that. And if it's variegated, I like it to read as a solid, but just have the depth. So I've worked both with indie dyers as well as with commercial companies. And I've absolutely loved working with all of them.
Right. Do you ever get surprised by like when people knit your shawls in different colors from what you would choose for them, or maybe in variegated or something? Like, do you get surprised by how it looks in there?
Absolutely. Yeah, I have one test knitter who is just the most fantastic person, and she loves a lot of bright variegated colors, and I love seeing what my patterns look like in hers because they look beautiful, but it's not necessarily what I had thought in the first place. But that's kind of what this is all about. Like, I'm giving you the roadmap and then you're making it whatever you want it to be. And how cool is that?
And I'd actually had few experiences like that when I would test knit for somebody and the designer would be like, why do I like your version better than mine? Why didn't I think of those colors? So it's like sometimes it happens that you just used to your own aesthetics and then like you're surprised by how other people interpret it.
There's definitely been times where I'm like, oh, now I want to knit it in that, like I want a copy of that to wear. Someone had done the fee shawl in a like oatmeal color with green as the mosaic, and it was gorgeous. And I'm like, oh, now I want that. I don't have the time to knit it, but I really want to. I just did a knit along with the Main Yarn Cruise on the Derry Ross shawl. And it's actually at this point my best selling shawl. And I'm not quite sure like what it is about it because I'd love to know so that I could recreate the experience.
Right.
So this is it. Yeah. And so it's got this really nice lace that is, again, it looks more complicated than it is, but I've set it up in such a way that I talked about where you could put markers so that you can keep track of it and it becomes super intuitive. And then this section looks really cool, but it's super easy because it's just, garter and then eyelets. And then I gave you the option for a picot bind off or an elastic bind off. So this is like just been going great guns, which I absolutely love.
I love the color of it also. And
Yeah,
those, like the stripes, the eyelet stripes, they're just
absolutely.
all my name.
Well, and the dyer that I worked with on this, her name is the Noble Thread, and she does botanical dyeing, which or natural dyeing, which just really speaks to my minimalist, eco-friendly, loving heart. So yeah, and it's got silk in it. This was just a dream to knit with, and she actually still has it as kits on her website. So this was just a fun knit, and everyone's loving it. And then this was the 2 years ago. This is the Philomena shawl, and this was written as a mystery knit along. So this was just a really fun knit as well. And then while we're on the Main Yarn Cruise kick, last year we did the Salt Hill shawl. So this is just 2 skeins. This is Jillian Kittles. And it's got this really cool slip stitch kind of like border, super easy but fun. I really like with this where it's got a stockinette base, but then by having these garters, like it just has this cool raise. Yeah, I really liked that. And then I'm a huge fan of worsted weight shawls. I wear them all winter long. So this is the Gowla shawl. Again, super easy and intuitive when you're knitting it. And this is written in 2 sizes. It's got a nice big garter edge because in my mind, when you get to those long rows, you deserve to garter. Like, I don't want to make it complicated for you. You deserve to just sit down and watch TV and garter or talk to people. Here's another one. This is one of my favorites. This is my signature color. I love this gold. This is called the Karna shawl. And it's got the eyelets, and then it's got this wonderful big thick border. I actually had worked with, given the Wooden Nest, Lindsay of the Wooden Nest, had done a natural dye-along thing last year, and she had used this as one of her giveaway prizes, and she knit it herself, and really loved it. So that was fun to see.
You mentioned a few knit-alongs. Like, what is it about knit-alongs that you like? Like, what's the idea behind organizing them? Do you use them mostly as the marketing tool, or do you seek that sense of community building?
Definitely the community building. It's very important to me that when somebody's in a knit along with me, that I'm interacting with them and then I'm cheering them on and giving them feedback on how everything's looking and just making them feel part of the community. So that's been a lot of fun to do that.
Are you like, surprised by the questions that coming up during knit-alongs? Because like, I mean, I've organized a few knit-alongs for different designers, and sometimes like it's very unexpected because the pattern has been tested, like it's been out for a while, but then like some people getting stumbled on things that like you wouldn't expect, and some questions come up that like seems sort of obvious to the designer but not necessarily obvious to other knitters, you know, like do you get that sometimes?
I have gotten that, and it's funny because in the beginning, earlier in my career, I would get scared that I had made a mistake. But what I've realized is that different people are at different stages. I mean, I knew that, but I've learned to stop second guessing myself and go, okay, how can I help them to see what it is that I've written? And often I'm just kindly saying, like, just, you know, just trust the pattern and just read through it. And most of the times people have come back to me and said, oh, I just missed blah, blah, blah. And then they're able to get it. But if not, you know, I've definitely walked people through a couple of things and sent them videos on techniques if they didn't know how to do it, just to help them along.
Right. No, I find that like actually sometimes happens to me. Like I would test knit something and something doesn't work. And I'm like, okay, is it my mistake? Is it designer's mistake? Am I skipping a couple lines? Did I not understand something? So it's like, it can be either way. But like, if a tester finds a mistake in your pattern, how do you take that?
I take it very well to them, but I'm horrified at myself because I'm very, very careful. And I've, you know, with having just released my 30th pattern, I've gotten into a groove. I'm using, if I have something that I've done before, I'm using that kind of as a base, and then I'm changing out things. So when I send it to them, in my mind, it should be perfect. So when they come back and say, you know, oh, there was this wrong, like it's like, oh, you know. But I say, thank you for letting me know, and I fix it and I send it back. And then I try and, you know.
Well, if you could give an advice to like a beginning budding designer, what would you share? What words of wisdom would you share with them?
I would say take it one step at a time. You know, work on one thing, and that would be writing your patterns. Work on that first. Don't worry so much about the other things. Once you feel confident in one step, then you can add on something else, you know. And I also would say, though, people often push this down the road. The number one thing you should do is set up your email list, because your email list is gold. It's the only thing you have. So I would say work on this and get an email list.
It's funny because I was just interviewing Brenda Shack, and she was like, first thing she asked me, she's like, do you have newsletter? Do you have the email list? Because you have to have it.
Brenda Shack's a friend of mine, so she's fabulous.
Loved her. I mean, her interview was just amazing. I really enjoyed
She's so
it.
funny.
She's funny, but she's also like very no nonsense, like very strong, inspiring woman, you know. So
Absolutely.
I loved getting to know her. I mean, I feel like we became good friends, not only thanks to the interview, but like prior to the interview and after interview, definitely. But
That's fabulous.
yeah. Well, I want to thank you for being my guest today. I really loved getting to know you and your design process, and I hope, you know, we'll stay in touch, and I can't wait to see what else you're coming up with.
Absolutely. It's been an absolute pleasure getting to know you and being able to share my process with you. It's something that I feel very passionate about, and my daughter would tell you I talk about a lot. So it was nice to have the time to sit down with you. Thank you.
Thank you.